The cracking of a revolver shot echoed through the canyon, sending a flock of startled birds into the amber sky above Whispering Creek, Colorado. Jackson Reid lowered his smoking Colt, his weathered face stoic as he watched the rattlesnake's body twitch its last. The year was 1878, and like the dying light of another lonely day, Jackson's hope for companionship had long since faded into the harsh reality of frontier life. At 32, Jackson had spent most of his adult life drifting through the territories, working cattle drives, breaking horses, and occasionally lending his gun hand to those who needed it. The Civil War had taken his brother, consumption had claimed his parents, and the rest of his kin had scattered like tumbleweeds across the vast American landscape. All he had now was his horse, Thunder, a sturdy Appaloosa with more sense than most men Jackson had encountered. He holstered his weapon and adjusted his worn Stetson, squinting at the setting sun. He'd need to make camp soon. Whispering Creek was still a day's ride away, and the mountain trails weren't forgiving after dark. Jackson gathered kindling for a fire, his movements automatic after years of solitary travel. As flames licked the gathering darkness, Jackson's thoughts drifted to town. He wasn't particularly looking forward to it. Towns meant people, and people meant complications. But his supplies were running low, and he'd promised Old Man Peterson he'd deliver a package of medicines from Denver. A man's word was all he had out here. The next morning came with the harsh clarity of mountain air. Jackson broke camp efficiently, packed Thunder, and continued down the winding trail toward Whispering Creek. By midday, the path widened, and Jackson noticed fresh hoofprints in the dirt. Multiple horses, moving fast, heading in the same direction he was. "Trouble ahead, maybe," he murmured to Thunder, who flicked an ear in response. Around a bend in the trail, Jackson reined in sharply. A small, covered wagon lay on its side, one wheel completely shattered. Personal belongings were scattered across the ground: a woman's bonnet, a damaged trunk with clothes spilling out, cooking utensils. But it was the soft weeping that caught his attention. Jackson dismounted cautiously, his hand hovering near his revolver. "Hello, anyone hurt?" The weeping stopped abruptly. From behind the overturned wagon, a woman emerged, a rifle trembling in her hands. "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse. Jackson raised his hands slowly. "Madam, I mean no harm, just passing through and saw your wagon." The woman stepped forward, and Jackson's breath caught. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with auburn hair escaping a simple braid. Her green eyes were wide with fear, but it was the dark bruises marring her face that made his blood run cold. A purple shadow bloomed across her left cheekbone, and her split lip had only recently stopped bleeding. "Are you alone?" she asked, the rifle still pointed at his chest. "Yes, madam, name's Jackson Reid." She studied him for a long moment before lowering the rifle slightly. "Elizabeth Abernathy." Her voice cracked. "My husband is dead." Jackson's eyes scanned the area. "The men who did this, are they coming back?" Elizabeth shook her head. "They think I'm dead too." She gestured to a dark stain on her dress. "Not my blood, my husband's." Jackson approached slowly, noting how she flinched when he came too close. "Those bruises, they from the same men?" Her eyes flashed. "No, those are from my husband." She touched her cheek self-consciously. These were his parting gift before the bandits came. The revelation hit Jackson like a physical blow. He'd seen his share of cruelty in this wild country, but something about this woman's quiet dignity in the face of such brutality stirred something long dormant within him. "You need medical attention, and that wagon's not going anywhere," Jackson said, his decision made. "Whispering Creek's a day's ride. My horse can carry us both." Elizabeth hesitated. "I can't leave. Everything I own is here." Jackson surveyed the scattered belongings. "What can't you part with?" "We'll take what Thunder can carry." Within the hour, they had salvaged what they could: a small bag of Elizabeth's clothing, a locket containing a picture of her parents, and a pouch of coins she'd kept hidden in her boot. Jackson helped her onto Thunder, trying not to notice how she winced at the movement. "Hold on to me." he instructed as he mounted behind her. The trail gets rough in places. Elizabeth sat stiffly, keeping as much distance between them as possible on the horse's back. As they rode, Jackson kept his senses alert, watching for any sign of the bandits' return. The woman remained silent, but he could feel the tension in her body, the occasional tremor that ran through her when the horse's gait jarred her injuries. "How long were you married?" Jackson asked, hoping conversation might ease her distress. 3 years, Elizabeth replied after a long pause. "My father arranged it. Harold was a successful merchant in St. Louis. I thought," she broke off, then continued more quietly, "I thought the frontier might change him." Jackson nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Some men get better out here, some get worse. The land has a way of stripping away pretenses." "He got worse," Elizabeth said simply. "Much worse." They made camp as darkness fell, finding a sheltered spot near a stream. Jackson built a fire and offered Elizabeth his bedroll, which she accepted with wary gratitude. He pretended not to notice when she positioned herself, so the fire remained between them. "I'll take first watch," Jackson said, settling against a boulder with his rifle across his knees. "You should rest." Elizabeth lay down but didn't close her eyes. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Reid?" Jackson considered the question, watching the firelight play across her bruised face. "Out here, folks help each other. It's how we survive." It was the simplest answer, though not the whole truth. "Most men would have kept riding," she observed. "I'm not most men," Jackson replied, then added more softly, "Get some sleep, Mrs. Abernathy. You're safe tonight." For the first time, Elizabeth's expression softened slightly. "It's Miss Abernathy now, I suppose." She closed her eyes, and eventually her breathing deepened into sleep. Jackson watched over her through the night, taking in her delicate features relaxed in slumber, the bruises stark against her pale skin. A fierce protectiveness swept through him, surprising in its intensity. He'd known this woman less than a day, yet something about her vulnerability combined with her evident strength called to him. They reached Whispering Creek by late afternoon the next day. The town had grown since Jackson's last visit, now boasting a proper church, a schoolhouse, and several new buildings along the main street. He guided Thunder directly to Doc Miller's house at the edge of town. "Jackson Reid," the elderly doctor greeted him from the porch. "Didn't expect to see you for another." His words died as he noticed Elizabeth. "Bring her inside, quickly." Elizabeth insisted on walking herself, though she accepted Jackson's arm for support. Inside, Doc Miller instructed her to sit on his examination table while he gathered supplies. "I'll wait outside," Jackson said, turning to leave. Elizabeth's hand shot out, grasping his wrist. "Stay, please." Her green eyes held his, pleading silently. Jackson nodded, moving to stand by the window while Doc Miller gently examined Elizabeth's injuries. 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, possible concussion, the doctor murmured, his kind face creased with concern. "These didn't happen all at once." "No," Elizabeth admitted. "My husband, you don't need to explain," Doc Miller interrupted gently. "I've seen such things before." He began cleaning and bandaging her visible wounds. "You'll need rest, several weeks at least." "I have nowhere to stay," Elizabeth said, her composure finally cracking. "My husband controlled all our money. What little I have won't last long." Before Jackson could speak, Doc Miller said, "Martha Jenkins at the boarding house always needs help with cooking and cleaning. She'd give you room and board for the work. I can speak to her." Elizabeth's relief was palpable. "Thank you, doctor." After her examination, Jackson escorted Elizabeth to the boarding house, where Martha Jenkins, a robust widow with a no-nonsense manner, took one look at Elizabeth's condition and ushered her inside with maternal efficiency. "Don't you worry about a thing, dear," Martha assured her. "We'll get you settled and healing in no time." Jackson lingered in the doorway. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Abernathy." Elizabeth turned, something unreadable in her expression. "Thank you, Mr. Reid, for everything." That night, Jackson took a room at the saloon, turning down offers of companionship from the working girls. He lay awake, thinking of Elizabeth's courage in the face of such brutality. Sleep eluded him as he recalled the feel of her body pressed against his during their long ride, the scent of her hair despite the trail dust. Morning found him at Peterson's general store, delivering the medicines as promised. James Peterson, a garrulous man with a fondness for gossip, eagerly shared the town's latest news. "Heard you brought in that beaten woman yesterday," Peterson said, arranging bottles on a shelf. "Word travels fast," Jackson frowned. "Her name is Miss Abernathy." Course, Peterson nodded. "Sheriff Wilkins wants to talk to her. 3 men were found dead 10 miles east of here yesterday. One had a wedding band with the initials HA. Folks are wondering if they're connected to your Miss Abernathy." Jackson's hand stilled on the counter. "Harold Abernathy, her husband." "That'd be my guess," Peterson agreed. "Sheriff figures bandits killed them, but he's asking questions all the same." Jackson visited Elizabeth that afternoon, finding her in the boarding house kitchen, her hands dusted with flour as she helped Martha prepare bread. Though still bruised, her face had lost some of its tension, and she'd arranged her hair to partially cover the worst marks. "Mr. Reid," she greeted him, attempting a smile that pulled at her split lip. "Miss Abernathy." Jackson removed his hat. "I came to see how you're settling in." Martha excused herself with a knowing look that made Jackson uncomfortable. When they were alone, Elizabeth wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm grateful for your concern," she said. "Mrs. Jenkins has been very kind." Jackson nodded, then decided directness was best. "The sheriff wants to speak with you. They found 3 men dead east of here. One might be your husband." Elizabeth paled, gripping the edge of the table. "I should have known they wouldn't just disappear." "You don't have to face this alone," Jackson said, surprising himself with the offer. "I'll go with you to the sheriff's office." Gratitude flickered in her eyes. "Why do you keep helping me, Mr. Reid?" Jackson struggled to articulate the feeling growing within him. "Because no one should have to carry such burdens alone." Sheriff Wilkins was a fair man with sharp eyes that missed little. He listened patiently as Elizabeth recounted the attack on their wagon, how her husband had struck her during an argument, how moments later 3 bandits had appeared, demanding money. When Harold resisted, they shot him. Elizabeth had played dead after one of the men struck her, and they'd eventually left, taking what valuables they could find. "And how did you come to be found by Mr. Reid?" Wilkins asked. "I was too weak to travel far," Elizabeth explained. "I was trying to salvage what I could when he found me." The sheriff nodded, making notes. "One of the dead men had your husband's ring. Seems they met some justice, though I don't condone vigilante action." His eyes flicked to Jackson, who kept his expression neutral. "I'll need you to identify your husband's body," Wilkins continued gently. "When you're strong enough." Elizabeth nodded, her face composed despite the tremor in her hands. "I understand." Outside the sheriff's office, Elizabeth's composure crumbled. Jackson guided her to a bench beneath an elm tree away from curious eyes. "I thought I'd feel relief," she whispered. "Knowing he can never hurt me again. Instead, I feel hollow," Jackson finished for her, "like a part of you is missing even though that part caused you pain." Elizabeth looked at him with surprise. "Yes, exactly that." "I've lost people too," Jackson said. "Not the same way, but loss leaves its mark regardless." They sat in companionable silence until Elizabeth spoke again. "I don't know what happens now. I've never been on my own before." "You're not on your own," Jackson said, surprising himself again. "Not anymore." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Jackson took odd jobs around Whispering Creek, breaking horses for the livery, helping with building repairs, even assisting the blacksmith when extra hands were needed. Each evening, he would visit Elizabeth at the boarding house, sometimes bringing small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, fresh berries from the hills, once a book of poetry he'd found at the general store. Elizabeth grew stronger, her bruises fading, her smile coming more easily. She proved invaluable to Martha, whose arthritis made certain tasks difficult. The older woman took Elizabeth under her wing, teaching her to manage household accounts and deal with the various personalities among the boarders. "You're sweet on that girl," Martha observed one evening when Jackson came calling. About time a man like you found someone worthy. Jackson stammered a denial, but Martha just laughed, patting his arm before calling Elizabeth down from upstairs. As summer deepened, Jackson found himself contemplating something he'd never seriously considered before putting down roots. He'd spent so many years drifting that the idea of permanence felt foreign, yet increasingly appealing. When Whispering Creek's livery owner, old Tim Buckley, mentioned he was looking to sell the business and move to California, Jackson found himself doing calculations in his head. "You'd be good at it," Elizabeth told him when he mentioned the possibility during an evening walk by the creek. "You have a way with horses and people trust you." Jackson looked at her, noting how the setting sun turned her auburn hair to flame. The bruises were gone now, and her natural beauty shone through. "It would mean staying in one place." "Would that be so terrible?" she asked, her voice soft. Not if. Jackson stopped himself, suddenly unsure. Elizabeth turned to face him fully. "Not if what, Jackson?" It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the sound of it on her lips gave him courage. "Not if you were here too." A blush spread across her cheeks. "I have nowhere else to go." "That's not what I meant," Jackson said, taking her hand tentatively. When she didn't pull away, he continued, "I'm not good with words, Elizabeth, but these past weeks, getting to know you, it's changed something in me." Elizabeth's eyes glistened. "I've been afraid to trust again, afraid to feel anything." "I would never hurt you," Jackson promised, his voice thick with emotion. "I know," she whispered, and then, with a boldness that surprised them both, she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, sweet, and filled with promise. When they parted, Jackson felt as though the world had shifted beneath his feet. "I should get you back," he said reluctantly. "Martha will be wondering." Elizabeth nodded but kept her hand in his as they walked back toward town. Neither spoke, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with new possibilities. The following day, Jackson made an offer on the livery. Tim Buckley accepted, seeming relieved that his business would pass to someone who would care for it properly. Word spread quickly through Whispering Creek that the drifter Jackson Reid was putting down stakes, and speculation ran rampant about his relationship with the widow Abernathy. "They're calling you a hero," Elizabeth told him with amusement one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch. "The lonely cowboy who rescued a damsel in distress." Jackson snorted. "You rescued yourself long before I came along. It took courage to leave that life behind." Elizabeth's expression sobered. "I didn't leave. He was taken from me." "Would you have stayed?" Jackson asked gently, "if he'd lived?" Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. "I've asked myself that same question. The day you found me, we were arguing because I'd told him I was leaving. That's when he hit me worse than ever before." She touched her cheek, remembering. "So no, I wouldn't have stayed. But I might never have found the strength to go through with it." Jackson took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "You're the strongest person I know, Elizabeth Abernathy." Their courtship progressed slowly, respectfully. Jackson was patient, understanding Elizabeth's need for caution. They attended church together on Sundays, took walks in the evenings, and sometimes rode out to the hills for picnics. The town watched with approval as the lonely cowboy and the wounded young woman healed each other. 3 months after Elizabeth's arrival in Whispering Creek, Jackson officially took ownership of the livery. The same day, he asked Elizabeth to marry him, presenting her with a simple silver ring set with a small emerald that matched her eyes. "It's not fancy," he apologized. "But it's honest, like what I feel for you." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect because it's from you," she hesitated. "Are you certain, Jackson? I come with scars, not all of them visible." Jackson cupped her face gently. "We all have scars, Elizabeth. Mine might not show on my skin, but they're their years of loneliness, of keeping people at a distance. You've helped me heal. I'd like to spend my life helping you do the same." "Then yes," she whispered, "I will marry you." Their wedding took place in Whispering Creek's little church on a crisp October day. Martha Jenkins insisted on hosting the reception at the boarding house, and the entire town turned out to celebrate. Even Sheriff Wilkins attended, presenting the couple with a handcrafted wooden box for keepsakes. "Never thought I'd see the day Jackson Reid settled down," he commented to Doc Miller as they watched the newlyweds dancing. "That woman changed him." "They changed each other," Doc Miller corrected, smiling as Elizabeth laughed at something Jackson whispered in her ear. "That's the way of true love." Jackson and Elizabeth moved into the small house behind the livery, which they spent weeks repairing and making their own. Elizabeth planted a garden while Jackson built furniture for their home. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sunset, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying each other's presence. Their first challenge as a married couple came when a man named George Abernathy arrived in Whispering Creek, claiming to be Harold's brother. Demanding Elizabeth return family heirlooms he insisted she had stolen. "My brother wrote to me about your thieving ways," he accused when he confronted her at the livery. "I've come to reclaim what's rightfully ours." Jackson stepped between them. "Your brother was a coward who beat his wife. Whatever Elizabeth has, she earned through suffering." George sneered, his hand moving toward his gun. "A woman's place is to obey her husband. Harold wrote that she needed discipline." In a flash, Jackson had his own revolver drawn. "You'll leave my wife alone or I'll show you discipline of a different kind." The confrontation drew a crowd, including Sheriff Wilkins, who convinced George Abernathy to settle the matter legally. When it became clear that George had no proof of his claims, and when several townspeople testified about Elizabeth's character and the abuse she had suffered, he was forced to leave empty-handed. "I was afraid," Elizabeth admitted that night as they lay in bed. "Not of him, but that you might believe him." Jackson pulled her closer. "Never. I know who you are, Elizabeth Reid. I see you not the woman Harold tried to break, not the victim George tried to paint, but you, brave, kind, resilient you." As their first year of marriage passed, Elizabeth discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought both joy and fear. "What if I'm not a good mother?" she confessed to Jackson one night, her hand resting on her growing belly. "I never had a proper example." Jackson covered her hand with his own. "You have so much love to give. I've seen it in how you care for Mrs. Jenkins when her arthritis pains her, how you teach the livery boys to read during their lunch breaks, how you never turn away anyone in need." Elizabeth smiled through her tears. "We'll learn together then." Their daughter, Margaret Rose Reid, was born the following spring, a healthy baby with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined chin. The birth was difficult, leaving Elizabeth weak for weeks afterward, but she recovered under Doc Miller's care and Jackson's devoted attention. "She's perfect," Jackson whispered the first time he held his daughter. "Just like her mother." As Margaret grew, so did the Reid families standing in Whispering Creek. Jackson expanded the livery, hiring 2 full-time workers. Elizabeth started a small school for the town's younger children, teaching reading and arithmetic 3 mornings a week in their front room. Word of their story spread beyond Whispering Creek. A reporter from a Denver newspaper once came to interview them, fascinated by the tale of the lonely cowboy who had rescued a beaten woman and challenged the frontier's acceptance of such abuse. "What you did shocked people," the reporter told Jackson. "Standing up for a woman against her husband's family, that's not how things are usually done out here." Jackson had simply shrugged. "I did what was right, nothing shocking about that," but Elizabeth knew better. In a world where women were often treated as property, where abuse was frequently overlooked, Jackson's unwavering support and public defense of her had indeed shocked the entire region. It had also inspired change in the years following their marriage. Whispering Creek saw other men standing up against abuse, other women finding the courage to leave dangerous situations. 5 years after their wedding, with Margaret now a spirited 4-year-old and a second child, James Thomas Reid, recently added to their family, Elizabeth found Jackson sitting on their porch one evening, staring thoughtfully at the sunset. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" she asked, settling beside him. Jackson took her hand, running his thumb over the silver band he'd placed there years before. "About the day I found you, how close I came to riding past that bend in the trail." Elizabeth leaned against his shoulder. "But you didn't." "No," he agreed. "Something made me stop. Fate, maybe? Or perhaps it was always meant to be," Elizabeth suggested. Two broken souls finding each other, healing together. Jackson smiled, kissing her forehead. "Whatever it was, I thank God for it every day." Inside their home, their children's laughter echoed, and the aroma of fresh bread filled the air. From the livery came the comfortable sounds of horses settling for the night. All around them, Whispering Creek continued its evening routines, shopkeepers closing up, families gathering for dinner, the saloon's piano starting its nightly entertainment. "Do you ever miss the freedom?" Elizabeth asked suddenly. The open trail answering to no one. Jackson considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the solitude," he admitted, "but then I remember the loneliness that came with it." He squeezed her hand. "I wouldn't trade what we have for all the freedom in the world." Elizabeth smiled, the last rays of sunset illuminating her face no longer marked by bruises but by laugh lines and the subtle signs of a life well lived. "Nor would I, not for anything." As darkness settled over Whispering Creek, the Reids remained on their porch, their silence comfortable, their future secure in each other's love. The lonely cowboy and the wounded woman had built something rare and precious on the frontier, a true partnership, a family bonded by choice rather than obligation, and a love that had indeed shocked the West with its simple, revolutionary message. That gentleness could be stronger than force, and that even the most damaged hearts could find healing in the right hands.